Where am I looking? Over here. Hello and welcome to the 10th Ask Andy question time. My name's Matthew Bone. I'm the political reporter for BBC Radio Manchester. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can get involved in the event tonight. The way it's going to work, we've got an audience here who are going to be asking questions to Andy Burnham. They'll also be able to contribute and ask any follow-ups that they like. We'll get around as quickly as we can. And if you're watching, you can use the hashtag AskAndyGM on Twitter, or you can just leave a comment under the Facebook video. I think the best place to start tonight, I'll get a quick question in myself. The best place to start tonight is trains. It's been an absolute shambles this week. Has been for a while.
It has.
What can you do as the Mayor of Greater Manchester about it?
Well, I hope you've noticed I've been trying to do everything I can, to be honest. I mean, part of my role is to give a voice when I've not got the power. I've not got the power, particularly over the trains. So in this instance, it's my job to speak up for you all, and I've tried to do that over the last fortnight. Finally, we got our call with the Transport Secretary today. He and his ministers were saying, oh, it's the new timetable, a few teething problems. I pointed out, to be honest, you're way off the mark, because this has been growing over a long period of time. You know, northern services have been operating way below what they should be. It's only gone into real meltdown in the last few days. So together with the Mayor of the Liverpool City region, we've kind of made four demands today. Firstly, we're saying, tell the truth about what's going wrong. It isn't just Network Rail being late with engineering works and the new timetable. Northern haven't been employing enough staff to run this service properly. That's number one, so say it as it is. Number two, we're saying that there needs to be a published action plan to put things right. So don't just say you've agreed some measures with them behind the scenes. Say what they are and the deadline by which these things have got to be done, so that everybody can judge Northern. And actually don't have this chaos of last-minute cancellations. If they're not going to be able to run services, say it the night before so everyone knows where they stand. You can't have people turning up and not knowing where they are. So that was the second thing. The third thing we've said is compensation. There's thousands and thousands of unanswered complaints in asking for compensation under the delay repay scheme. I said there needs to be a deadline by which they're paid and a broader compensation scheme for customers. And number four, if Northern don't hit the agreed action plan to get things back to where they should be, then a process should be started to remove the franchise. It's as simple as that, basically.
Is there anybody in the audience who has been directly affected by Northern Trains? Would you like to just make a comment as to what happened to you?
This evening I've just bought a return ticket between Wigan and Manchester. Paid £9.60 during the peak time. And what happened, I got off the train at Manchester, asked one of the trains running from Wigan to from Manchester to Wigan afterwards, after 9 o'clock, and the bloke behind the desk said there were no trains. So I've just paid £9.60.
Don't know how you
and there's no trains. I'm not sure I'm going to get back. But I think there's a way around it. I probably have to go via sort of Warrington Banquet by another railway operator. But
it's ridiculous, isn't it?
This service is not acceptable. What's worse about this is, you know, Manchester and Liverpool are trying to become tourist destinations. This is going to absolutely destroy the visitor economy if we're not careful.
So Andy, what's the end point with this? Is there a moment where you're going to say, if things don't improve, we will campaign to take the franchise off them?
That's what I said. You know, we need an action plan for how they're going to get things to where they should be under the new timetable. And if they don't meet the deadlines, next to all of those actions, a process should be started to remove the franchise.
So
you know,
how long have they got before they have to have things sorted out?
Well, I mean, I don't know, weeks. I mean, we were told today that things will be back to normal within 2 weeks. Well, I mean, that's 2 whole weeks of misery. And I'm not sure I believe that is what they will do. You know, they've failed on every level as far as I'm concerned. And to hear that, I mean, Neil, it's just not acceptable, is it? You know, people's lives have been turned upside down. I've been sort of getting tweets saying, I'm on my final warning at work, I missed a family christening, you know, I'm missing my kids, I'm not seeing them go to bed. People's lives are just being ruined by this. It's like they're running a railway on their terms rather than what they've been told to do. You know, when they can be bothered to run services. And the key thing is, everyone's trying to blame everybody else, Network Rail. I see members from the RMT here tonight. I'm pretty sure that there was a new thing they brought in where they weren't paying people properly for working on rest days. So they're not bringing, there was a nod there from one of the colleagues. So that, this is a financial decision that they've taken, and they are making heavy profits under this franchise, Arriva Group, and that is just wrong. It's fundamentally unacceptable. So they've lost the benefit of the doubt. They're on notice as far as I'm concerned, and I am now a member of Transport for the North Board, as of recently, and I will be pushing for a process to be initiated for the franchise to be removed. We cannot allow this company to continue to inflict misery on the long-suffering travelling public of Greater Manchester. They're on notice as far as I'm concerned.
Now, we've got a question about Northern Trains, because obviously part of this is to do with the strike action that's been taking place as well. Paul, where's Paul in the audience? Paul, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Paul Howes, I'm the NEC member for the North West and North Wales region, so obviously covering Merseyrail and Northern. Our question is, one, you actually stated on one of your other roadshows that you were willing to meet Mick Cash. Still hasn't happened. The open invitation is still there. The other thing is, will you support the RMT union on Northern Trains to retain the second safety critical person? Because at the moment this company are hell-bent on removing the guard off a train, which means that you will be travelling with just a driver. And if you look at other transport industries, would you travel just with a pilot and no other crew? No, you wouldn't. And would you feel safe travelling with just a driver? Anything could happen on that train, and he's locked away, and all his concern is to drive that train. So what we want is a bit of commitment off you, Andy, to come and support our campaign.
Well, definitely me. I mean, I don't know why that hasn't happened, because I checked this before, and I was told we hadn't had the kind of formal request, and if we have, I'm sorry. I will commit again tonight to meeting you. And yeah, maybe I'll look at this. I'm no expert on this guards issue. I mean, I'm told that trains run without them in other parts of the country, and that's what they say. But I know that extra people around can give extra help to disabled passengers, can deal with any incidents. It's only going to obviously probably help the travelling public. So I just want it resolved. I mean, I'm no expert on the safety issues, I'll be honest with you. That's why I'm prepared to sit down with you and talk to you. And I'm sorry that hasn't happened so far, but I give a commitment tonight it will happen soon. We'll have that meeting in the next couple of weeks.
We've got a question just over here. Would you want to just introduce yourself and ask your question?
Kevin Greening's my name. It's a follow-up question, really, to the last one. I and a lot of people are concerned about the implementation of driver-only trains. In the event that Northern Rail does implement driver-only trains, what happens in the case where you've got people with a sensory or mobility impairment who need assistance boarding and alighting the trains, especially where there are unmanned stations? And would it be possible, I don't know if there are any people with a technical knowledge to do so, in the event that wheelchair users could have retractable ramps on the trains, especially where you've got unmanned stations. The problem is the driver can't get out to assist people. And the second part of this question is, if there is a situation on the train, for example, something of a traumatic nature, where a member of the public needs assistance, how is the driver going to sort that out? He can't leave his cab.
I think, and you've had personal experience of this, have you, in terms of using the trains with a condition? Just explain to us what that is. Just for people who are at home.
I'm a blind person. I use Northern Rail on a regular basis, on the especially the Manchester Victoria Leeds line, and it's very helpful to have a guard on the train, because if anything happens, you straight away have backup. And especially when trains are overcrowded, as sometimes happens, the guard will do everything in his power to get a person a seat. Andy, it might take a while to do, but they are extremely helpful, and I'm afraid it would be a worse state of affairs without them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's very clear. Yeah. It's very clear. I mean, I've said a moment ago, I'm no expert on the issue, but I've heard what's just been said, and I heard what was said before. I think, where driver-only trains are in operation, largely London and the South East, it's a different situation because nearly all the stations have got staff in them as far as I know. But as you're saying, if you've got stations that are unmanned, as we've got many of them across Greater Manchester, then that could further reduce disability access. Already half of our stations here are not wheelchair accessible, which is a frankly disgraceful state of affairs. And if you then take the guard away, you are potentially further limiting access. So I'm listening very carefully to what's been said, and the recent events have made me think differently about the issue. I'll be honest about that. And as I say, I'll be prepared to both meet with disability groups, but also the RMT to discuss this issue further. I know in Mersey Travel they're having talks, I think, about it, but I'm pretty sure that every single station on the Mersey rail network is staffed till services run, and that is not the case in Greater Manchester. So the disability access issues are very real, as are the security issues. And as I say, I've not taken a firm position because I didn't really know the detail. But I'm, as I say, my view is coming round to what you're saying. Mike
Kavanagh has contacted us on Twitter to say, I have to ask you about the trains. How soon do you think we'll see some improvement following the meeting today? And I'd add to that, how soon do you expect some improvement? Because they've talked about 2 weeks, and that isn't good enough, is it?
It's been, honestly, it's been quite frankly an unbelievable experience of raising this because nobody was listening. If you turned on the radio on Monday morning, it was all about Thameslink. It's like nothing here was happening, and the whole place was in meltdown, and there was no recognition of it. As soon as things go wrong in London and the South East, it's on Newsnight, the Today programme, and there's questions in the House. When it happens here, it's like, oh well, they can just put up with it. Yeah, and that's how it is, isn't it? Northern commuters are treated as second-class commuters, and they have been. And as I say, I'm trying to change that by trying to give a voice to people. Effectively, myself and Steve Rotherham, we forced this phone call today with the Transport Secretary. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't take services to go into meltdown for us to get a phone call with the Transport Secretary. He should have been on it. He should have been on top of it when the problems were happening in the early part of this year. So I'm afraid it's just chaotic. The railways are shambolic, and I am much firmer in my view that renationalisation needs to happen as soon as possible.
It may have not had a great take-up on network radio, but BBC Radio Manchester have been covering that, so if you want to keep across it, that'd be the station to listen to. We're going to move on to a question about housing now. Ronan, are you around here? Yep, over there.
Hello. As a young professional and a current renter, I'm concerned by the ever-increasing house prices in Manchester. The Financial Times ran an article in March stating that out of almost 15,000 flats given planning permission in 2016 and 2017, not one was offered at social rent or at 80% of the market rate. What is the Mayor going to do to ensure affordable housing for first-time buyers like myself?
Well, I'm not responsible for local planning policies. I need to say that. I mean, I can't, that isn't my responsibility. I think Manchester City Council would and do dispute those figures, by the way. But anyway, let me just put that to one side. What can I do? Well, there's a number of things that I can do. Firstly, I've got the ability to direct what's called the Greater Manchester Housing Fund. When George Osborne agreed the deal with GM, it was very much skewed towards big private sector entities building the flats that you can see being built around the city centre. So there wasn't much flexibility. So they've been given out in loans, but as those loans are repaid, Greater Manchester now has got much more ability to redirect that funding towards more affordable homes, or indeed homes for social rent. So that's what we plan to do. What you will see in the next month or two is a new housing policy coming forward for Greater Manchester that will be underpinned by a completely rewritten planning framework, or the spatial framework as it's called. What I've said very clearly is I want a 20-year planning framework to end the housing crisis in Greater Manchester. We need a plan, both in terms of a housing policy and a planning policy, that builds the right number of homes that are affordable to all income levels in all the places where they are needed. And that is quite a big change from where we've been, but that's what we're working on at the moment. So, as I say, I don't have the kind of direct ability to say X percentage in X council. That's not what I can do. What I can do is help free up sites owned by public bodies in town centres, in the city centre, and they are more likely to be used then to build affordable or social rented housing. I just want to assure you that this is absolutely at the top of our priorities. We've got 84,000 people on housing waiting lists across Greater Manchester. People know how passionate I am about ending rough sleeping and homelessness. This can only be done if we have a pretty major rethink about housing policy and building homes that people can afford in the places where we need them.
Andy, there have been targets for social and affordable housing for years and they keep being missed. What makes you think that this new plan will actually be listened to?
Because this is not just because it's me, but the creation of a mayor has actually given us the opportunity now to change the way the whole planning and housing system works. Because in the past, there wasn't a kind of an ability to intervene at the GM level to shape the way things were done. You know, councils had to kind of like receive planning applications and kind of steer them as best they could and try and get public benefit from those applications. What I can do as mayor is obviously use the funding that I've just mentioned to incentivise different types of housing development. I've got powers of CPO, so I can help clear brownfield sites that previously developers wouldn't touch. We've just agreed a housing deal with the government, which has given us £50 million to clean up brownfield sites. So the point being, I can intervene to open up brownfield sites that previously just have been there for years and no one could do anything with. But those are the places where the type of housing you're describing is more likely to be built. So we've got new levers that come with the mayoral role that I fully intend to use.
Ronan, how convinced are you by that, and what would you like to see happen?
I think just some sort of commitment to some sort of assurance to ensure that I will have a future as a homeowner in Manchester at some point. I saw your piece, I saw your interview on Tuesday night with the Channel 4 News, and you mentioned how you were not afraid to ask the big questions. And I just don't know if you can you assure me that you were going to ask these big questions to these residential developers?
Definitely. I mean, I've been saying that these events, and apologise to those who've heard this before, but we've had effectively a developer-led approach to planning and housing in Greater Manchester for quite a long time, where they've been dictating where they will go and what they will build, you know, and councils have been trying to then kind of, I say, change it at the fringes. We need a completely different approach. We need a plan to solve the housing crisis. That's what we need. And that includes helping young people onto the housing ladder. So I've talked a bit about rent to own. You know, can we start developing more rent to own options for people in their 20s and their 30s so that they can kind of, you know, take that longer kind of journey towards the housing ladder. We definitely need more homes for social rent. Myself and the City Mayor of Salford, who leads on this, Paul Dennett, you know, if you speak to Paul is very passionate about these things. It's why I appointed him in his role to bring about this change in our approach to housing and planning. So a change is underway, and I don't want to sit here tonight and say, oh, and it will all be built next year, and it will, you know, that would be ridiculous. But we are making a fundamental change to the way we're trying to do things, a much more interventionist approach, and as I say, a genuine effort to build homes that people can truly afford. The other thing I would add, because the housing debate always gets trapped in building new homes and where we're going to build them. How about the private rented sector? Surely, you know, we've got to have a much more kind of direct approach to them, challenging what they're doing, because largely unregulated. In GM, 20% of people now live in private rented accommodation. We think 4 in 10 homes in the private rented sector are beneath the decent home standard. Post-Grenfell, that is an absolute disgrace. And we need to challenge that much more directly, in my view, because there are many, many tens of thousands of people living in the private rented sector, paying large amounts of rent for poorly maintained homes and living week to week in fear of eviction. And if we're going to solve the housing crisis, we need to do something about that as well.
We've got a question from a lady at the back there.
My concern is, you know, building on brownfield sites is one way of tackling the problem, but if I've lived in Manchester all my life, and I walk around Manchester a lot and have a look round. There is loads of empty properties that have been, you know, there's I could just walk a few minutes from here and there's somewhere across the road, which has got stories upon stories of, and it's been empty for years. And it's just waiting for the price to go up. And this is what's happening in Manchester. This has been going on a long time while developers make their mind up, while the planning department, whatever's going on. But meanwhile, those properties could be used.
Yeah.
Those properties could be used. I think that's a bigger question. The empty properties in Manchester and the properties that are not being accessed, they're just sitting on them as investments.
Well, I agree with you. Sorry, just to...
I was going to say, so a very low number of affordable homes being built while there are these empty properties which can be left empty. Is Manchester City Council doing enough to actually encourage developers and force developers to operate differently here?
Well, the difficulty for all councils is there is a limit to what they can do against land banking. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but they don't actually have the tools, really, to stop people doing that. I've long argued, I did this as a kind of front bencher when I was challenging for the leadership, I argued for a land value tax in this country because at the moment land isn't properly taxed, so they can sit on massive chunks of land or properties and just wait, as you say, for when they want to do it, rather than when it's right for us for that land to be released. They just sit there waiting for the right price. But it can't be right when Greenbelt's getting built on and these things are just sitting there. So the change, as I say, with the mayor is I do have powers of compulsory purchase if I, working with a local authority, want to use them. So that is a difference. We can do things differently if we choose to do it. And the logic of the spatial framework that we'll put forward is it's going to all be about that. I already have Stockport Council talking to me about designating a mayoral development zone on the west of Stockport. And in that zone, I would be able to then use these CPO powers to clear the way for more regeneration. So we have got the chance to kind of turn this debate around a bit. And obviously where councils want me to, because I can't just go in and do it without their permission, but where we want to work in partnership, I fully intend to do that. But it still won't address the national problem of land banking, which is, an easy thing for developers to do under the current taxation system.
There could be an audit. There could be an audit of empty properties, and the homelessness issue, as well as the young people who want properties, could be addressed in that way. Because then there's an argument for we've got 1,000 empty spaces. We don't need to build. Actually, we've got that. But if they're not being used by a certain time, then they're going to be. Something needs to be done because I'm sure everybody here has seen all those empty places. I don't want to see any more buildings demolished and rebuilt. High towers for what? For who's that for? It's not for the residents of Manchester. It might bring some money in, but that's not going to be affordable accommodation for people.
Andy, if everybody...
both, I would say, in my view.
If everybody's seen this for a while and you've said it's a problem for a while, why haven't you used these compulsory purchase orders already? And if it's because the council haven't asked, why aren't the council asking for you to do that?
Well, we're beginning to, because when I came in, I said I wanted a fundamental rewrite of the spatial framework, and I wanted to move away from, as I say, a developer-led approach, which was going straight to green belt and greenfield because it's cheaper basically for them to do that, and they build these. They don't have to clean up the land and they can build higher value homes there. That's why they go there. We need to start building where, as everyone is saying in the audience, it's right for the public. Build higher density developments closer to the public transport system so that we're not just putting more and more cars on the road, because we definitely can't carry on doing that. So that's the kind of rewrite I've put in place, and I set up something called the Town Centre Challenge. I don't know if people have followed this, but I asked every borough, all 10 boroughs, to nominate a town that we could start giving a real focused look at to say, well, could we possibly use these CPO powers? And that was the Stockport example that I gave a moment ago. So, it's not easy to come in and do it within months. It does take a bit of time, but this new approach is in train now, and I'm absolutely ready to intervene. And we're talking to Network Rail, the NHS and others releasing public land, because there's a lot of public land that could be released for housing, and we need to release that too.
We've got a question just for, we'll take one more question on this, then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I think maybe when you're talking about, obviously you can't go in and you can't force the councils to make sure the correct planning is granted for social housing and affordable housing, but is there not an element of sort of getting sort of a great element of collaboration between the councils, because it's good for having sort of your policy that you mentioned there of having a local town, but if they're not all equally committed to it, it obviously doesn't help everyone, does it? So if there's an example of leading the way in Stockport, but that doesn't help me as a renter in Manchester, central Manchester, does it? So I think maybe on your part there needs to be, well, I don't know, could there be more emphasis on getting the councils to collaborate equally?
Well, we're working on a new housing strategy that Paul Dennett is writing, and there'll be common principles that we're hoping that everybody will sign up to. So we've just done this housing deal with the government, which I mentioned, which involves around 220-ish thousand houses being built over the next 20 years. I've broadly got those figures right. I'll give you the exact figures tomorrow, but that's broadly what we've been asked to do. What we're saying is, let's make sure that we break that down. How many of those homes are going to be for social rent? Well, I would say we should be getting up to about a third there so that we can deal with that waiting list I spoke about before. How many are going to be truly affordable? And again, that should be the middle chunk. Well, okay, there is still need for some at higher levels, but let's have that mix across the piece. The problem with the housing debate in this country, we're always talking about building X many thousand more homes a year. The point is, you could do that and still not solve the housing crisis, because they could be the wrong type of homes on the greenfield, not affordable to people. So we need a housing policy and planning policy here, as I was saying, that actually solves the housing crisis by building new homes in every level that are affordable to everybody. And I think, it's going to be different across different places, because obviously the city centre is in more demand than other places. But that's why I'm saying, regenerate some of our proud outlying towns across Greater Manchester. They are with the best will in the world not going to be the retail centres that they once were. They are, to pick up the lady's point from the back, they are full of land that could be taken for new housing development. Actually, if they give up on some of the retail space that's kind of gone, really. And that's the kind of new thinking I think we need to see. So yeah, maybe people can't afford to live in the city centre as much as they would have done in the past. But if they're living in a town that's on the up, that's close to Metrolink and the rail station, then that's not so bad.
I think Manchester applies to places like Moss Side and Wally Range and places like that. That's not necessarily the city centre, is it?
Manchester does still have, though, if you look at it, very high, the highest, I think, social rented housing stock. I mean, it does, within its borders, have a very large social rented housing stock, and I think sometimes that point gets missed. It's much bigger than any other of the other 9 boroughs.
We've got to move on to the next topic. We'll come back to that towards the end if we've got time. There's a question on homelessness which we would like to take. Judith Watson, where's Judith? Judith.
Rough sleeping and aggressive begging in the city centre, and it's important to differentiate between the two, seems to be worse now than it was 12 months ago. Whatever is being done isn't working. What are your proposals to get this right? Our city centre is a disgrace and deteriorating rapidly.
It's hard to say exactly what the situation is, because the figures, the figures are not particularly reliable. It did get worse over the first 12 months. Most people that I speak to are reporting a slight improvement in recent months. I only say slight, I'm not kind of kidding myself. The feeling is it is moving slowly in the right direction, but we've definitely got a long way to go. The problem is still a very big problem. What I can say is Greater Manchester's response to that problem has got considerably better over the last 12 months, and policies are now in place, some already in effect and some coming, that will begin to make a substantial, we hope, a substantial difference. So the first one we have is something called the SIB, the Social Impact Bond. I don't know if you're aware of it, but this is a policy that we've brought through whereby around 200 properties have been made available for people who are, let's say, the longer term rough sleepers in Manchester. They are properties that give them a property, then it's extra support as well. Around 200 people have been referred to that scheme About 60 have been housed so far, and that is beginning to make a difference. We've just secured £8 million from the government to develop a full housing first approach, which is like a development of what I've just said. And that will involve around 500 properties, and we hope that will begin in October this year. There's so much going on. I could be here all night and tell you everything that's going on. The problem is a huge problem, and it's not all in the gift of Greater Manchester. Universal credit is being rolled out right now across Greater Manchester this year. You know, it almost breaks my heart. For every one person we're taking off the streets, Universal credit could be putting 2 more back on. So we can't control the scale of the problem. All we can try and do is pick up the pieces and deal with it.
And it is difficult to sort of work out exactly how much things have changed in this first year. So we just have a show of hands in the audience. How many people think there has been an improvement in the number of people rough sleeping in Manchester? Could you just raise your hands if you think there has? Okay, maybe 1 or 2. And the statistics back this up, don't they?
The only thing I would say is,
And ask a question. Is that allowed within the rules? Because
just let Andy answer this first,
It
and then we'll
is
come
about
to you
this
next.
one, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll answer the question, then you ask yours.
And then you can do your
the thing I would
follow-up,
say to everybody is the point you said at the beginning. I think it's important to differentiate levels of rough sleeping in the city and actually the numbers of people you may see in the city in a daytime. They are 2 different things. I do a regular walk around of the city centre at around 6 o'clock on a regular basis. I've done it about 6 times since I was elected, so I do it every 2 months or so. And the impression I was giving to you is based on my 6 o'clock walk around, because the impression you get there is different to what you will see during the day. And I think it is important to differentiate. You know, I think the picture that people might see is the one during the day, but they are 2 different things. And most of the organisations dealing with rough sleeping in Greater Manchester say it has got slightly better. One of the longest term rough sleepers out on the streets of Manchester who I met on my last walk around confirmed that and said the same. It is getting slightly better, but there's a long way to go, and I'd be the first to say that.
Just like to ask you a question now.
Indeed. No, you did actually move towards the point I was going to make, Andy, really, which is this differentiation between the homeless, which obviously need as much help as can be, given to them. There are all sorts of reasons as to why people end up being homeless. But there is also this big question of aggressive begging as well. My wife's been assaulted in the street, 4:30 on a Friday afternoon at the corner of Market Street when she's been spat at. It really is very, very intimidating. And obviously we're reporting that to the police, because obviously if the police don't know, they can't do much about it. We've been in contact with them. We found, they've arrested, I believe, 5 or 6 people in the last week, for aggressive begging. These people are charity fraudsters. They are actually on our streets, feeding drug habits, relying on, our natural human response to try and help someone that needs, sustenance, food, warmth, and the rest of it. Let's be as generous as possible to the homeless. That's not our beef, on our side. What she's saying is that when it comes down to the people that are actually breaking the law, that are being aggressive, we do need to be taking a bit of a harder stick to those people and getting them off the streets and stopping them, blighting our city centre.
Well, if it's known that somebody's got a flat, somewhere to go, and they're doing that, then I would agree with you. That is just not defensible in any way, and that needs to be dealt with. I think the problem we've got at the moment is we're in a bit of a kind of interim position here, where we don't have enough provision in place to be sure that everybody can be looked after every night. Now, Manchester City Council have made, in my view, a very brave and a very welcome commitment to provide a bed for every rough sleeper every night. That was in their local election manifesto. And we want to work with them to support the delivery of that commitment through what we're doing. We've got the Big Change Fund, which was set up via the council and the partnership board, which gives money to people to help with travel and clothes and things. We've got the Mayor's Homelessness Fund, which I set up, which gives money to the charities and the organisations working with people. What I want to do is get to a position at some point this year where we can say, there is now enough provision for people to give everybody a bed for the night. Therefore, you know, please don't give on the street. Direct people to where they will get the support, the proper professional support that we want them to get, not just the roof over their head, but also on other support to help them turn things around, so that then we can begin to give a different message out to the public about how to deal with those situations. Because we have to differentiate here. I think some of the people that you describe are really making it much worse for people who are genuinely in need, and that is such a real sadness. But I can assure you there are many people out there who are in genuine and real need, and I personally don't want an approach at the moment that starts to criminalise people for not having a home and nowhere else to go.
Okay, we've got quite a few people who want to ask questions about this. The gentleman in the sunglasses first, would you like to put your question to Andy?
Hello, Andy. My name is Rick. I'm from Stockport. How are you doing? You okay? Good. Thank you for everyone who's attended tonight. So, I'm an addict. I'm in recovery at the moment, going through a 12-step program. One of my questions is the fact that I came across a drug called DMT, which stands for dimethyltryptamine. And this drug, or plant medicine, came from the Amazon. And the Amazonian tribes have this drug and connect to the spirit world and connect to the universe. And when I had this drug, it told me to go back into recovery and follow a 12-step program. I had a profound spiritual experience on it. And I wasn't spiritual in any way, shape or form. I've studied particle physics and how the universe forms.
Could you what specific question is it that you want Andy to answer?
So,
about it?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. In terms of homeless people, I feel that we need to help them first and then build up on the community. But we have a real chance here to actually help other people through plant medicines and through a 12-step program, because it is a spiritual program. So what implements are the government and yourself, because it's an everlasting thing. It's a constant spiral of people going out of control, drinking and taking drugs, and ultimately ended up on the streets. And there needs to be a change somewhere.
So could they use those sorts of techniques?
Yeah. I mean, because
Andy,
can I just finish 1 second? So I'm setting up my own meditation business, which gives a naturally occurring DMT trip, which opens up the third eye or the pineal gland, and that helps with connecting to yourself and connecting to your soul. Mm-hmm. So that's one method without using drugs. How would that get legalised, or how would that
I'll be honest, I don't know about that particular that particular treatment, but let me just kind of pick up your broader point. When I've gone on my walk around the city centre, you know, I've met people who were ex-forces, I've met people fleeing domestic violence, I've met people who've just been released from Strangeways, I've met young care leavers, people have been bullied, LGBT young people have been bullied, you know, a whole range of people. And the thing is, you know, going back to the previous discussion with the ladies and gentlemen there, you know, you often hear people say, don't you, oh, they're all this or they're all that. But they're not all anything, to be honest with you, because actually everyone's story is incredibly, markedly different. The one thing that I would say that you can say is in common is trauma. So all people, I think, who are out on the street probably have experienced some, I'm talking about true people who are homeless and sleeping rough, they've experienced some form of trauma in their life. And that actually, in the end, is the cause of possibly the mental health problem, which has then led to the drink or the drug problem. So there's some hurt or some real harm deep inside. And I think the only answer to it is not the revolving door of a roof over their head here and there. I don't think that actually helps deal with that. The only answer is this approach we're talking about, home plus support in a fixed place on an ongoing basis to allow people to make a journey of recovery away from the streets. And that should be going through addiction, mental health support, and then eventually towards volunteering and hopefully hopefully employment. Somebody's working in my office in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority she's working in our homelessness team, and she was on the streets herself. I mean, there are so many people who show every day that it's possible to make that journey. And I don't know whether what you're saying, everybody will need something different. So, but I think the point is, it's got to be a person-centred, long-term approach if you truly want to turn this around. I'll be the first to say, it's not an easy problem. I've learned in the last year it's not an easy problem to crack. All I can say to you all tonight is, I will be doing this every single day until we have turned it around and made it much better from what it is right now.
The lady in the white here. I just wait for the microphone to get to you. Thanks.
Thanks. Hi, Andy. My name's
yeah.
Holly. I'm a postgraduate student at the Uni of Manchester. I'm doing a study on homelessness at the minute. So I was just wondering if, in hindsight, you think you might have been a bit overambitious with your target of eradication by 2020. Specifically in light of the government target, which is eradication by 2027, and how those two kind of fit together. Obviously, it's a big task, specifically because in Greater Manchester, across the combined authority, the number of homeless people has gone up by 554% in the past 7 years, and in central Manchester alone, over 1,200%. So, whether the kind of enormity of the task has overfaced you.
It's a really good question, and the answer is no, I don't think so. I think we are wealthy enough as a society to put a roof over every head every night of the week. I think that should be perfectly possible. And though it is a big challenge, let's not forget, we're only talking of hundreds of people in Greater Manchester, according to the official statistics. We're not talking of thousands of people. The official figures might downplay it a little, but even if we were talking of 1,000 people, it should be possible to house 1,000 people every night of the week. And I just referred to the Manchester City Council commitment. That, if it can be delivered, means that we're well on the way to achieving it. My promise was to end the need for rough sleeping by 2020. And I know I remain absolutely clear that if we put our minds to it, and the private sector help us, and the voluntary sector help, as they are brilliantly, in the faith sector, we're actually building a bit of a movement here in Greater Manchester that is all pulling in that direction. And as I sit here tonight, I'm confident that we're going to do it. And the point that I would put back to anyone in government who set that target of 2027, I would say to them, what good is that? What good is a target like that to anybody out there tonight? When I came in, I wanted to galvanise this place to do something about what I was witnessing on the streets. So actually, I said something that in many ways was a bit of a kind of shock to the system, because I wanted to galvanise action. It wasn't good enough. We were just letting it creep up, and no one was doing enough as far as I was concerned. If I was standing to be mayor of this place, it seemed to me that I had to say, no, this isn't good enough. We need to change, turn this around. I think we've come a lot. You may not see all the work we've done, but we've come a long way in a year. We've built a movement of people who are pulling in the same direction. We're getting real commitments now from the councils and different public bodies, and I'm confident we can do it. If I fall slightly short and political opponents say, oh, well, failure, I don't care, because we'll have got that close. I don't mind. And if that's enough for some people to say, oh, well, stand against him and, vote him out of office, fine. I'm not bothered about politicians saving face and embarrassment and will I meet my target and will I be... I'm not bothered about that. I'm bothered about doing something about rough sleeping, and I feel we are beginning to really make inroads into the problem. And yes, I'm confident we can still do it.
Okay, we've got to move on to the next topic, which is Nicola Holt's question. Nicola, just wait for the microphone to get over there. And I'd like to ask you a question, please.
Yeah, many cities and even entire countries are banning single-use plastics, recognising the environmental damage that these cause. Are there any plans to take action in Manchester? Can't we ban plastic cups, cutlery, bottles and food trays? I know the government have released a report recently on the action that they're planning to take, and it just seems a bit underwhelming. And I feel like Manchester has a really good opportunity here to not be left behind and to take some positive action on this problem.
Right question. And to be honest with you, it was the thinking that was behind the Green Summit that we held in March. I don't know if you followed much of that, but the whole idea of that was to put Greater Manchester in a leadership position on the green agenda and zero carbon. And coming out of the summit, we can't ban, is the answer to your question, but we did develop a pledge to end single-use plastics in Greater Manchester by 2020. And at last count, we got around 100 businesses that have signed up to that. So I kind of feel in this day and age, bans, yeah, maybe, but actually let's build more groundswell of support from the bottom up. Maybe they are the things that kind of make change happen more quickly these days. So we've got a plastic-free GM campaign, and I would just encourage everybody to spread the word, get behind it, challenge people, and if you're getting straws or whatever mixers or cups, start challenging, and let's make a virtue out of the fact that we become the first city to eliminate single-use plastics. I don't see why we can't achieve that. The other big thing at the Green Summit was I've proposed accelerating GM being zero carbon by 10 years ahead of the rest of the country. So going for a 2040 timetable as to a 2050. I just want us to be the leaders in these debates, out there making the change happen more quickly. That's what Greater Manchester's always done in its past, and I think on the environment, it's what we need to do going forward.
Nicola, you've heard that, the sort of what Andy's planning to do with that. Does that go far enough for you? Are you happy with that?
I think it's a great start, but I don't think all the businesses are getting the message. I don't really want to pick one out publicly. There's a few businesses who have a lot of people going along, and they've gone from using ceramic cups back to using plastic-lined paper cups that can't be recycled, and this seems to be happening a lot. And I don't know if it's a cost issue or staff issue, but clearly some of these big businesses are not getting that message, and I'm not really seeing that message being communicated or any incentive. So it's great to hear that it's on the agenda, but I'm not really seeing any progress. Just from where I'm sat, I'm sure progress is happening, but...
I just looked with relief that, thank God this is a glass here tonight. No, I think we need to put more behind it. I don't know if people know Real Junk Food on Oxford Street, opposite our office, opposite Churchgate. But Corinne there is one, she was the first one who came to the fore really and said she wanted to help lead the plastic-free GM kind of drive. So I think what we're trying to do is put some weight behind her. So you're right, we need to do more. It can't just be when the media is focusing on it and then everyone goes away again. There's a real demand for a change here, isn't there? When you kind of look at the damage to the oceans and everything, we've all got to play our part. But I'll hear what you're saying, and I need to keep the city's focus on that. We're going to reconvene the Green Summit in March next year. Because at that point I want people to confirm this ambition to go carbon neutral or zero carbon 10 years ahead of the rest of the country. Because if we do that, then I think a lot will flow from that, in terms of accelerated ambition on lots of fronts. And the more everyone gets behind that and makes it a groundswell, the stronger it will be.
There's a comment from the lady with the red glasses that you wanted to make, is that right?
It wasn't a comment, it was a separate question.
Separate question, okay.
My name's Marcia Hutchinson. I'm the newly appointed chair of the Manchester Women's Forum. Windrush. I did a quick Google of Andy Burnham plus Windrush and I couldn't find anything. I might have missed something, but I organised a meeting in May at the West Indian Centre. Less than a week's notice, 350 people turned up. Some people were there an hour and a half before it started. The number of questions and the number of problems that people are having is astonishing. The law centre is swamped. Legal firms are swamped. People don't have the money to pay for this kind of service. There are people who have had their passports taken, who haven't been able to leave the country for over 12 years. What is the Mayor's office doing, and what can the Mayor's office do? I'd also like to ask you about Operation Nexus, which is Home Office operatives being placed inside police stations. So one woman I know rang 999 to complain about a car being set on fire on her street. She's got a Ghanaian accent, and the question she was asked is, what is your nationality? The police have been tasked with the process, with the the work of basically carrying out immigration. So anyone who encounters the police, whether you're a criminal or you just encounter them in any way, if you have immigration issues, there's a good chance you can be deported. My understanding is the Mayor's office has some responsibility for the police. And this is quite serious because people are not going to report things to the police if they think they can be deported, even though they've not committed any crime. Is there any way you can firstly address some of the concerns of the Windrush generation, maybe come down to Moss Side and talk to people? And secondly, do you have any involvement in these processes where larger police stations have immigration officers based inside them and the police are required to help them meet deportation targets?
It's a good question.
Very good question. Two very good questions. On the second, I can honestly say to you, I don't have any knowledge of what you've just said. And I'm looking towards the Deputy Mayor and Ian. I don't know, Ian, if you would take up that. I'll come back to your first question on the Windrush after Ian's taken that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, Ian Pilling, I'm Deputy Chief Constable. I've no knowledge around, I'm trying to think why that person would have been asked that question. It may have been because the person answering the telephone call thought it was a hate crime, and that is a possible suggestion, and therefore asked the nationality to try and understand that. But I genuinely don't know. I'd have to have a look at the specifics. There are immigration staff that work in our police stations, but they work in the custody suite only, and they're embedded in there to assist us with immigration issues that arise when people are arrested. So rather than us having to make checks with the immigration service, they will assist us with that. But there is absolutely no targets that GMP are part of with any sort of deportation whatsoever. I can assure you of that. If you want any more information around those, particularly the first point, I can certainly help you out and have a chat with you.
Can you say that no one who has reported a crime has been subsequently arrested for being an illegal immigrant?
I couldn't give you a 100% guarantee, but I would find it very surprising if that was the case.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the Deputy Mayor as well on this, because if there is that perception in the community, and if we need to send a very clear message out from a GM perspective about what we do, if that would help, then I'm sure we would do it just to clarify the situation so that there's no, and if the policy is unacceptable when we look into it, then we would be the first to challenge it with the Home Secretary. But I mean, I just want to give you assurance there that we would deal with that if that's what the.
We will look into that.
Yes, absolutely.
With Ian and the Chief Constable.
Yeah.
Could I just ask you, what happened to the lady who made that report? What was the next, after she was asked what her nationality was, what happened then?
She chose not to continue.
She just didn't, she withdrew the report of the crime.
She thought she was being a good citizen and reporting that a car had been torched on the street. So as it wasn't something done to her, she thought, well, you know what, I think I won't proceed with this. And that's the problem of things going underground. If people think, if I report something, I might be subject to deportation.
On Windrush, I think I've got a meeting soon that's in my diary with some people who've written to me about it. But I'll be honest, I haven't done enough. I should do more. So I will come down to Moss Side and meet a group of people. I was with Lucy Powell yesterday, who said she held a surgery and she couldn't believe it. She was there for 5 hours. The number of people who were coming, showing passports, British passports, but with Jamaica on the bottom, or Trinidad and Tobago, and telling her the things that had happened. And yeah, I mean, I will do more. I will come down and I will give you more support. Obviously, when we saw the statements from the government admitting, it gave the impression, this was my impression, that the problem had gone away. And it was only talking to Lucy when I realised that actually that isn't the case at all. And I saw a tweet from David Lammy this week. I don't know if everybody else saw it, but he was saying that he'd had a surgery and Home Office officials said, oh, we'll come and help you and we'll deal with it. And then they'd gone and arrested somebody who'd come to the surgery. I mean, yeah, serious issues here. So, thank you for raising it, and I'm more than ready to do more to help.
I've got a question from a gentleman at the back over here.
Well, I just wanted to support Marcia's issue, because since Manchester started holding hate crime awareness workshops, I've been running some of those, and there are people, because they know if they report issues, automatically their immigration status will be checked. They verbally abuse, some are physically abused, spat at, and they don't have any confidence to pick the phone and make a complaint to the police. So any clarification will be very useful.
Yeah.
And I think, I was at the event at the Westwood Center as well, and lots of people, lots of bad feeling in the community. But we trying to turn that, on its head and have a positive celebration, on the 24th of June. And we're delighted that GMP is supporting that. We're hoping to have a video of you, Andy, because on the 23rd of June, you are in Newcastle. Thank you.
So how do you fix that then?
Thank you. You know my diary better than me.
And yeah, but obviously there's a serious point there about those perceptions in those communities. Yeah. How big of a concern is that to hear that from
a massive concern? And Bev's nodding as well for both of us. And we will, if we can't come down that day, we will come down. Both of us, I'm sure, we will come down and we will. We would want to deal with those issues very directly and provide the reassurance that's needed from our perspective at least. If there's issues for us to take to the Home Office, absolutely we'll do that too. So, yeah.
We're going to stay with policing for the next question. This is Matthew Schofield. Where are you, Matthew?
Evening, Andy. Hi.
Hi, Matthew.
Can you tell us, please, what progress you've been able to make in getting the central government to fund more essential police resources for Greater Manchester?
And we've had the Chief Constable come on our radio station and say we're really stretched and we've cut so many officers and we're struggling to deal with calls and they're prioritising them. This can't go on, can it?
No, it can't. And I'll invite the Deputy Mayor maybe to add a little bit to this. We've made, and we did make the case very, very forcibly, the Chief Constable and myself. I said there was just no good, all the warm words of praise, rightly, for our police officers last year and everything they did, when it was then followed up by another cut last autumn. And I think, anybody went on doorsteps at the local elections as we did, this is now a widespread concern of the public. We have asked you all, we're not going to create the credit because obviously you're paying, but we've asked you all to pay more council tax to fund the first major recruitment drive for some time, I think it's fair to say, which will lead to 100 extra police officers. We're working with GMP to protect the number of PCSOs. So for now, the problem isn't getting any worse. It's getting marginally better. But no, there is no progress. And actually, the problem is Greater Manchester Police is much more dependent on its central government grant than other police forces. We cannot raise as much to backfill the cuts from our council tax. So when they cut that grant, it really hurts us. And I'm afraid they've been doing that now for 8 years. So that's where we are. It's not acceptable. And I think what we're going to have to do going into the budget is work with other mayors and police and crime commissioners to say, enough is absolutely enough. We need to start increasing funding for our police.
Matthew's question was what progress have you made in
None.
getting... None.
I don't think we have. Well, I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to come in, who's responsibility for policing and crime, who more directly speaks to the government than me on this, but I don't see any change. The new Home Secretary didn't say anything to the Police Federation yesterday that made me think that we were about to get any more money.
No, as far as the government's grant that goes to policing, we've made no progress at all. And for the last 8 years, although the government said that they were maintaining the money for the police, what they meant was they were giving the same amount of money in cash each year. And of course, with inflation and other rising costs, that meant a cut in real terms. And that's what the police service has had to cope with. That's why, despite in the early years with Tony Lloyd as police commissioner, everything was done to strip out the back office. But in the end, it did come down to having to cut our main expenditure, which is on the people we employ. So we've lost 2,000 police officers, gone from 8,000 to 6,000. We lost over 1,000 police staff and PCSOs over that time. And that is having a real impact in our neighbourhoods. And we're really alive to that, and we're really worried about it. And I understand people's concerns about it. This year, the government still didn't increase the amount they give us for police. But they had to recognise, after bombardment over many years from police and crime commissioners, and including Andy and myself over the last year, that the call for the more money because of the impact of these cuts was too great to resist. But they said, actually, you can put the council tax up by £12 a year. So no more money from government, but we could raise the council tax. So we consulted with the leaders of the local authorities. We consulted with the public in a survey. 74% of the public said we'd rather pay the money and get more police. And so that's what we did. We are now getting, for the first time in 8 years, an increase to the total establishment of police officers. We can protect the number of PCSOs. We are going to prove further, and it's already happened substantially this year, and Ian knows I get a report from him every week on the 101 service. That's going in the right direction now, and we'll improve it further. We've been able to employ another, I think, is it 70 digital forensic people? Because the number of crimes now that need technical experts to interrogate mobile phones and computers is just going through the roof, and we've got big backlogs, so we've been able to employ more forensic experts and do other things and commit to applying some of those extra police officers in our neighbourhood divisional officers so that they have an impact at the local level. But it is very tough. And so far, despite what the new Home Secretary said yesterday, there's been no response from government, and it's falling on local council taxpayers in two ways: paying more this year, but actually having a much less service than you had 8 years ago.
So as our representatives talking about the police here, why have you been unable to make a strong enough case for more money from central government?
I think we've made a very strong case, and it's not just us, it's every police and crime commissioner all over the country have worked together to make the same case. We've had the policing ministers. I go to meetings in London of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. We have the policing minister there. He listens. We've letters to the Home Office. We had a private meeting, didn't we, Andy, with Theresa May, I think around December, and this was one of the issues we raised with her, ex-Home Secretary, who's responsible for a lot of this reduction in police funding. She nodded, but we got no joy in the budget. We'll see what happens in the comprehensive spending review. It may be Savid Javid, the new Home Secretary, his brother is a senior police officer, so we'll see if that makes any difference.
I hope, yeah. Do you actually think, Andy, that disproportionality issue that you mentioned before, with Greater Manchester being more dependent on central government funding than others, do you actually think most people understand that?
No.
I don't,
no.
I've got to say.
No.
I think it's something that needs to be brought out much stronger.
It's been true of austerity more broadly, isn't it? Yeah. When you cut central government grants to councils or the police, the areas you're hitting are the poorest areas. And I'm afraid, no, they do that knowing that, in my view, this is a more political point, I don't intend these events to be party political, but I'm going to say it, they do it knowing that they're not going to get political heat from their own places about those things, because the rural police forces do not feel the same effect that we feel. So that's where we are. And just to add to what Bev said, no, we haven't been listened to, but think about last year. I had to argue up until December to get them to honour the cost of the attack on the arena. And it seems to me that Brexit is just sort of crowding out basic, good, decent practice, and getting through to the government even on basics at the moment seems to me to be impossible. Grayling today, back on that one, it's taken weeks to even get. We had to force him into this phone call today because they just don't think they have to do anything. And Bev and I were ministers, and we didn't. I'd like to think operate like that, but it seems that that's how the country is running at the moment. The Grenfell family is the same. They were left to fend for themselves. It doesn't feel to me like the country is functioning properly at the moment, and I make that as a kind of point about how things should be done.
I think there's a comment from the gentleman at the front here. Just wait for the microphone to get to you.
Hello, Andy. My name's John Fletcher. I'm the founder of Project 125. We campaign for fair representation for disabled people within the Labour Party, and I'm also standing for the NEC of the Labour Party. As you might have guessed, I'm going to ask you about fair representation for disabled people? And I've asked you this many a time on Twitter, and I've never got an answer. So I'm hoping, don't let me down.
It's the point of...
Right?
There's your chance.
Because I shall keep an eye on you. I shall set my dog on you.
He looks very friendly. He's wagging his tail at the moment. He doesn't look very...
Seriously, Andy, disabled people have probably the worst service out of government, local government. We are virtually ignored representation-wise. We are the most seriously affected group in the country by political decisions, and yet we do not have a fair voice. 1 in 5 people in this country have a disability or declare a disability. To give you some idea of the lack of representation, and I'm going to just take the Labour Party, so I do apologise about that.
You're right to challenge.
0.77% of Labour candidates in the last general election had declared a disability. That's not even 1%. The GMCA, how many of your members have a disability and declare it?
If the 10 council leaders, you mean? Or of all councillors?
Of all the of the 10?
I don't think any of the 10.
What representation have disabled people got? You're making decisions that seriously affect our lives. We were talking about one earlier, the rail. But another example is we've been talking about hate crimes. Hate crimes for disabled people often go unnoticed. What are you going to do to actually make sure that we are represented in Greater Manchester? Because I can't see it happening at the moment.
Okay.
And I'm quite happy to talk to you
absolutely
post this meeting about this, because but I think we've got a big problem is that often we're invited to come and meet people and we're patted on the head and sent away. We've got to be very much a part of the decision making that affects our lives.
Absolutely. So let's get an answer.
It's really powerful what you've said, and I'm sure everyone in the room agrees, and I do too. So there are 2 issues here, aren't there? Party representation, which, as you said, is very poor, and I think that's a reflection of the demands of seeking selection as a councillor or an MP or whatever it might be. You know, in terms of time and how you have to spend.
Can I just come back to you on a point on that? We actually released yesterday the results of a poll that we did of disabled Labour members, right? 88% did not feel that they were supported by the NEC.
I know,
and 75% said they felt there was a big problem of disability discrimination at all levels of the party. But this isn't just a Labour Party thing. This is a national thing.
Sure. So those, your response to that?
Yeah, those issues, I say, I fully agree with you. And it means really challenging the structures that are there for selections. And I completely agree with you about that. But I've got to answer tonight more broadly as the Mayor in terms of the voice of disabled people in the formulation of policy for everybody in Greater Manchester. And you are right to say you've looked but you can't see, which is a fair point because it isn't there at the moment. What I have committed to establishing is a disability advisory panel within the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which would have the ability to look across all of the policy that we cover. Planning, policing, housing, everything, transport, crucially. And work is underway to convene that body, a representative panel of disabled people to advise me on all areas of policy. Alongside it, we put forward the idea of an access committee, a GM access committee, to challenge major public venues with regard to levels of disability access, not just physical access, but also for young people and adults with autism, for instance, or blind visual impairments. So that's the commitment we've made. You know, I wish I could say to you tonight we haven't made as much progress as quickly as we should have done. But I take on board exactly what you're saying. I will meet with you to discuss it further. We need to make more progress more quickly.
I think there's a follow-up question from the lady. Is the lady at the front here, I think, first? Or okay, we'll go to the
thank you very much. I'm very glad this topic has been brought up tonight, because there is an issue at the moment. Every few years, we have these things called elections. Local elections, general elections. Most disabled people can vote. Now, you might say, yes, you've got a postal vote. It means somebody's got to do it for me. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all have inclusivity and increase our independence with regard to voting? Now, I appreciate tonight you cannot do what I'm going to suggest because it would require legislation. But might I make a suggestion, and hopefully somebody here can pass it on to the powers that be? When will the day come that those with a sensory impairment, such as blind or visually impaired, can vote online? The majority of us have access to the internet due to accessible software. It is quite easy to vote online because, after all, at the end of the day, we can register for the electoral register online. So wouldn't it be a good thing if we could all vote online?
So voting online, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it should be a human right, really. If you can cast your own, you should be able to cast your own vote rather than somebody having to do it for you if technology allows that. And absolutely, the security is the only thing, isn't it? But
increase the turnout, wouldn't it?
It would increase the turnout. And
lot of Russian votes coming in.
Well, you'd have to do it carefully, but I don't see why you can't. If you can bank online, surely you can vote online. I mean, I know, okay, there's issues with online banking, but broadly, I think it should be able to be done. I mean, if you vote in an internal Labour Party election, you can vote online. And I've never known anybody challenge the security of that process, so I honestly don't see why it couldn't be done.
If I can just make
I'm really sorry, but we've got a lot of people who are desperate to make another comment, but maybe you can have a quick word after the meeting. Yep. If you'd like to make your point.
Yeah, so my question really kind of touches on access. It also talks about, touching on the affordable housing and things like that. My question really is around making the built environment accessible, with specific reference really to shared spaces and cycleways. So for blind and partially sighted people, where local authorities within Greater Manchester, for example, have refused to install a controlled crossing, that therefore means that vulnerable pedestrians are at the point where, I should reframe that. The fact is that our local authorities now passing over their duty of care to vulnerable pedestrians over to the decisions of cyclists as to whether or not they stop. Now, this applies to cycleways, but also in terms of shared spaces with electric vehicles. We have a shared space in Preston called Fishergate, which is an absolute disaster. We have Poynton in Manchester that has become a no-go area for blind and partially sighted people, and we have a development now proposed within Preston. What will the Mayor pledge to do within Greater Manchester in light of the Women and Equalities report back in April last year to call a stop these development of shared spaces or open spaces, because there is now a way of not using the term shared space?
Okay.
Well, God, that's a very good question. The way we should tackle it, in my view, and I'd be interested in what people's views are about it, but I feel Oxford Road has tried to come up with an answer here where it provides protected space for every different road user. So it's tried to kind of create a high quality pedestrian space, segregated cycling space, segregated from the road space. Now I don't know, because I've not used it from your perspective, but that's what I think is something like that is what we should try to do. What we've got is Chris Boardman as our cycling and walking commissioner. And what I will do, if there is a wish to meet him to discuss these issues, to make sure we get the balance right between pedestrians and cyclists, and particularly pedestrians with disabilities, then I think that is something that he and his team would want to hear. So, if there's a wish to meet, I'm sure Chris would be more than willing to meet to discuss that with you.
We've got time for a couple more questions before we end, because time is flying by. We've got one about buses, which is on the way, but the last one that's been submitted to us, which we were doing tonight, is from Catherine. I'm afraid you mentioned Brexit intruding. I'm afraid it's going to intrude on here as well. Catherine, where's your question?
Hello.
Hi, Catherine.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Will Labour's failure to oppose Brexit do more damage to the party or the country in the long term?
If Labour were to take a position now of opposing Brexit outright, I think that would probably damage the country, if I'm honest with you, because I think it would deepen the rift of the referendum and make it possibly unbridgeable, because it would create a lot of anger amongst people who voted Leave. And I voted Remain. I know Manchester majority voted Remain. So did Trafford, so did Stockport. But the 7 other boroughs voted majority Leave, and some by a considerable margin. And if you think about the effect of that policy on Greater Manchester, I think it would be divisive within our society, in my view, and it wouldn't bring people back together. And so I think we have to kind of take this step by step. When the government puts its cards on the table, I think that is the time for people to say, what is our position on this? If they are heading towards a hard Brexit, then I can tell you for now, I won't be with them, and I will be kind of strengthening my own position much more against what they are doing. The difficult thing is we're in the dark at the moment. We don't have any seat at that negotiating table. But I think we need to kind of, when we see what they're proposing, that's when this debate will really, I think, come back to life. Effectively, we've been rerunning the referendum for 2 years here because we've been in the dark. Tomorrow morning, there'll be a report to our combined authority that will say, it's called the Brexit Monitor, I'd recommend it to you, unemployment in GM is going to be at a 44-month high. And we reckon that is the chilling effect of Brexit in terms of investment and in terms of people coming here. So I think it is beginning to have an effect on our economy. I'm not sure it's yet been very widely felt. I'll just say to you, we've got to take this as a bit of a journey as we see it unfold and then adjust our position accordingly. To take a position of outright opposition here, I think would really drive a big wedge between those Remain and Leave voters and actually would make Greater Manchester more divided than it is. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And,
I'm hoping that you're right. I'm really hoping it was a genuine question. I don't know the answer. I think listening to all the other questions...
Do you have a... Just take the microphone. That's okay.
All the other questions are really centred on the need for investment, on the need for resources, and if we're damaging ourselves, my fear is that all those things, that's all for nothing. It's not going to happen. I feel that the party could be seen as at best irrelevant and at worst complicit, unless at some point, and I take your point that this might not be the right point, but unless there is an effective opposition to what damage it may do. And it's seen to happen.
I really hear what you're saying, and I am watching things, I can assure you, extremely closely. And I am looking at the effect on Greater Manchester, and at all times I will inform the public here as clearly as I can about what I think the effect will be. We have this ongoing report, and it will be published again tomorrow, and it's worsening information, if you like. What I would say to you is, it's that moment when the government actually says, this is what we're proposing for the customs union and this is the kind of relationship that we're suggesting. If at that point that is going to cause profound damage, then I think at that point is when people step forward and say, well, we can't sleepwalk into this. And I think that's the position we're at. Greater Manchester sends more of its exports to the EU than the UK average. So if the deal is bad, it will be even worse here than it will in other parts of the country. And I'm very mindful of that in considering my position.
We've got a follow-up question just from the gentleman there, and if you could just make a very brief follow-up if you can, and then we're going to get our next question in.
Just to add some numbers to the lady's comment, to be fair. In terms of ERDF funding, the GMCA itself got £92 million in the last 7-year period. In terms of investment for construction, we've had £1 billion come through in each 7-year cycle for best part, I think, through 3 cycles that have helped regenerate Manchester. All this money is apolitical money. It's got nothing to do with politics. You can just apply for it and get it. Even if that money was to come back via the government, we've now got to apply to what could be a different party in central government to get any of that money back. The Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund is 30% funded by ERDF funding. So I suppose as a business owner, I want to understand how that will kind of affect aspects of Greater Manchester's sort of small business economy. The business growth hubs are all funded via European money. Does that make sense? So where do you close that gap, I suppose is my question.
So we've done an assessment of Brexit, and we can make that available to you. On that particular issue, we get about £100 million a year of investment that comes directly or indirectly from Europe. What I mean by that is some of it is directly from Europe that the UK government has to match. So overall we get about £100 million. The replacement to that, the government are calling the Shared Prosperity Fund. But as with everything at the moment, going back to what I was saying about normal government not functioning, they've not given us any details of this or how much we're going to get from it. Yeah, and as the lady was saying, it could be that the money's going to drop considerably. We're living in really uncertain times here, volatile times, and I'm not sure we can all predict where this takes us. As I say, I am mindful at all times of the kind of divide we have in GM society. And first and foremost, as mayor, I can't widen that. My job is to bring people together, not alienate people. But if it comes to it, when the government puts a deal on the table, I would be saying to our GM MPs, vote against it. Because I can't sit here as our economy gets absolutely shot to pieces. So I'm not saying which position I'm in at the moment because I haven't seen the deal that they're doing. But if it is a damaging deal that creates a hard border with Ireland, where we get a lot of our trade, then I wouldn't rule out the position I will take, and I will take, but I'm going to do it. I think at the moment, if you come out and make statements about Brexit, it feels like people are rerunning the referendum because no one knows what they're actually proposing. But when we know what they're proposing, that will be the time for cards on the table and very clear decisions to be taken. And as I say, I've tried to say it tonight, I don't shy from saying those things where I feel they need to be said.
Okay, Andy, we've got less than 5 minutes left. There's someone who's dying to ask a question about buses over here. So just give me your name and then put your question.
My name's Gary. I've been trying to get answers about this subject for quite some time now. And I even asked for a meet, to actually meet Andy Burnham in person, and that never happened. What I want to know is what's going to happen with public transport in this city, to improve public, especially the buses, improve the ticketing options, the 28-day tickets. The 28-day tickets should really be monthly. And also, the Get Me There card, which, to be honest with you, is just an absolute embarrassment to Manchester. I want to know what's going to happen to improve public transport, to improve integrated ticketing, to bring us a card, a Get Me There card, like the Leap card in Dublin. I want to know can this process be sped up a bit?
Okay, so do you agree that the Get Me There card's rubbish, and what you're going to do to change it?
It's limited. I'll agree with that. That's a politician's answer there. There is so much we need to do. Transport is our biggest kind of barrier, I think, to Greater Manchester moving forward. The system isn't working. It's obvious for people. We are trying, step by step, to piece this system back together. The reason we can't have an Oyster card here, the reason we have a Get Me There card and not the Oyster card is a very simple one. Margaret Thatcher. Most things can be traced back to her. But she deregulated the buses of Greater Manchester in the mid-80s. So they basically charge what they like, go where they like, do what they like. And because of that, we can't integrate our system in the way that London has an integrated... They carried on with the ability to regulate their buses, where everywhere else got it taken away. So we've had this chaos basically inflicted upon us. We are slowly trying to put the pieces back. So you may have seen last weekend we put out plans for a zonal system around Metrolink because we want to move to a more modern way where you don't go end to end anymore, but you can have zonal. If you buy a 1 and 2 card, you can go across all of the GM in those zones on any given day. You get much more for your money. Seriously, that's our proposal there. It will be contactless from January next year. So it'll be the zonal system, it'll be contactless. Small steps maybe, but this is what I've got to do, making incremental change. Tomorrow the CA will consider our proposals for bus reform. So I'm setting out big objectives for public transport in this city, particularly the buses, and that will be then integrating the buses with that zonal system with regard to ticketing. I've got powers passed by Parliament last year to re-regulate the buses, and they will change in this city, make no mistake. All of those things, the buses though, we can't tell the buses what to do, that was my point. But once we begin to use our powers over them, we will be able to tell them what to do. And so step by step, we're trying to make this transport system work better. There's no point in me saying, I'll do it, it's all going to be done. There's no point. I have inherited a shambolic transport system. The only bit that works well is the bit that Bob and his team do, which is Metrolink. Metrolink has its problems, don't get me wrong, but it's the most functional part of our system. It is, and we run that. That's the only bit that we run. The bus companies are in charge of the buses, and who are they accountable to? Themselves. The rail companies, well, we've been talking about them tonight, and we have a Secretary of State who's totally absent, who isn't doing his job. And then we have Highways England in charge of the roads, and they let the smart motorway run on and on and on. I'm sorry, this sounds like me whinging back to you, but a year in this job has taught me that we don't have the power in this city over our own transport system. I can't stop them.
Okay.
That is wrong, and I agree with you.
Okay, well, that's as Andy said, that's limited.
Just very lastly, they can, but that was the deregulated system that Margaret Thatcher brought in. At the request of the GM Labour leaders, George Osborne, through gritted teeth, put a bill through Parliament as part of the devolution deal to give us the power to re-regulate our buses. So we have got that power again for the first time in 30 years, and we intend to use it.
That is it. There is no more. Thanks everybody for coming along, and thanks for watching our own as well.